Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we have Professor Bradley or Brad Turner. Professor Turner is the head of the MND research group, the MND group, disease group, and a research lead of the Brain Health and Repair Mission at the Florey. His group has a broad research interest in neurodegenerative, I can never say that word, Brad, ever, diseases affecting the voluntary motor system in the brain and spinal cord. His team focuses on MND. This is a really, really brief summary of Brad because if I did his entire biography, it's all we would do is talk about that. So Brad's really not
Would be
interested.
boring.
Yeah, Brad would be really.
Yeah.
Brad has a massive brain, but I've discovered he also has a really massive heart too. So this is going to be a great interview. Morning, Brad.
Morning, Jane.
Brad, we like to do the whole who is Brad, not what you do. Who's Brad?
Brad is a scientist, but he's also a human, and he's committed. I'm talking about myself in third person. He's committed more than half of his life to this disease. So this is a it's more than a career. It's more than a passion. It's an obsession. I never stopped thinking about MND, and I never stopped thinking about a potential future in which we can end MND. That's what I'm all about. That's what motivates me and my team.
That's pretty massive, Brad.
Look, it is, and I think we've spoken about this before, but it comes down to the MND clock, as we call it. So, what is the MND clock? The MND clock is the inevitable and relentless nature of this disease. It is unstoppable. It is unrelenting, and therefore, everything we do in this space should be urgent, and it should be in tune with the MND clock, which is always counting down. I did start off in this field. I'm going to tell you right now, it was purely academic. So I
That's
started
kind
off
of the
working
question.
on
Why MND? Yeah.
yeah, I started off working on Alzheimer's disease, and then there was a PhD opportunity to work on MND back in 2001. So for me at that time, it was purely academic. It was curiosity based. But I can tell you right now, after 24 years of doing this, and I've seen scores and scores and generations of MND patients and their families succumb to this disease. It's personal. It is deeply personal and deeply rooted within me. So it is like I said, it's an obsession.
When I saw you recently in Human and we were surrounded by people with MND, and you came up to me and you said, Jane, I have to do this. I have to solve this.
I do. Um, it it's one of the cruelest diseases known to humankind, and it's just engineered in a way that inflicts the maximum cruelty and horror on people and their families and their carers. It's and we it's obviously it's awful for the patients, but it's also awful for the family and the carers who are the frontline workers, if you like, and they're left behind. When someone succumbs to MND, these people are left behind. They're burnt forever by their experience. But I think there is a lot we can learn from them, and we should always embrace the MND community. The MND community, and I'm talking here about people with lived experience, is the greatest resource that we have as researchers in fighting this disease.
I agree. And finally, the research community, aside from you and some others, are waking up to that now.
Yeah, it's look, we've been doing lab tours, for over a decade. It, we also reach out to patients as well. I've been to patients' homes, I've been to clinic, I've been to community events, advocacy events. It works both ways. Obviously, with MND, you've got to make an effort to get out and engage with these people who can be profoundly disabled and restricted by the disease. And I make the experience or the research as real as possible for my staff and students. So this is likewise when we have visitors, so we have lab tours, MND patients and families visit us and they see research at the coalface, but likewise we need to see the disease at the coalface
Yeah,
because it
because,
makes it real and it impresses that urgency. There
and I
is no time to waste.
No, that's what we say the whole time. We don't have any time to waste. And
Yeah.
also, often when researchers see people with MND, it's in a formal setting.
Mhm.
So there's no understanding of the effort that it has taken to get that person to that event, formal setting, and everyone's on their best behavior. You know,
I agree.
going into the home is absolutely necessary.
I agree. I think it's my personal relationships with people living with MND that are more impactful than any lab visit or going to any conference. And I don't like it, Jane. You go to a conference and you see the wheelchairs and the mobility aids, they're all lined up. But to me, there's a sense of isolation for these people. They don't seem to be they should be the star of the show.
Right.
And I had the fortune of attending a conference a few years ago in the States called the Healing ALS Conference. And the patients there were the keynote speakers. They were the plenary speakers. It was wonderful to see. And and I think as researchers, we get a bit lost in the science at times, but of course we do. We're passionate about the science. And I think people with lived experience and the patients and people living with MND should have the first question at every conference because they are the experts. They are living with this disease day in, day out. And I always say to people with MND, I say it's a privilege as a researcher to be working around the clock trying to solve this wicked disease for you, but we can't do it without you. So I live in service to the MND community, and that's a relationship that we should all appreciate, and it should be really drummed in to students who want to embark upon this so-called career in MND. It's not a career. You're in service.
There's an issue that a lot of MND sufferers have, and it's excessive salaria, so the dribbling nonstop. And it makes a really shitty life even worse. But do you think, okay, we can't get anyone to listen to us to do study about this? There's one woman, God love her, who put in for a grant application, but it was knocked back because apparently it's not important enough. But this, for people suffering with MND, is a number one issue. And that's one of the frustrations is that people are not lived experience is still not being listened to properly.
My advice to that female researcher is to apply again and again and again until it gets up.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. It is salaria and excessive drooling and secretions. It's very unpleasant
It's distressing.
and distressing. We
It's
need to throw more research dollars at that problem. There are some medications that can help with that, but they don't solve it. So I agree with you. That's actually a good example of something which we call co-design in medical research. It's when the patients, right from the outset of the research, they define what the core issues are, and they co-design the research along with the scientists. So I absolutely agree.
oops,
Um,
oh, that didn't work.
yeah,
Do it again. How does spending time with people with MND impact the way you approach your research and your
it's
colleagues?
yeah, it absolutely impresses the urgency of what we're doing. Ultimately, our role as researchers is to discover and then to translate those discoveries into a meaningful treatment for people with MND. One of the frustrations I have with the medical research system is that it is chronically underfunded. We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
I find that it is overburdened with regulation. You need approvals and permits to do anything. It's slow going. It can be cumbersome. It can be frustrating. Even if you get positive results in the lab, getting that into a clinical trial and then getting that ultimately into bodies, into patients, is long term.
Is
And
that is that a financial based issue, or is it a fear of not wanting to cause harm?
I think it's both. So I can tell you right now that the FDA and the TGA probably care more about safety than efficacy, drug effectiveness. So safety is their top priority when you're advancing a discovery or a lead drug into clinical trial. Financial, yes. So there was an article in the Herald Sun yesterday, and it made the news, Channel 10 News. The medical research institutes in Victoria are facing challenges. And basically, for every research grant dollar that you bring in to a medical research institute, you need to find 48 cents to actually do the work, to carry out that work. And that's not funded currently by the government or the foundations. That has to be picked up by the medical research institutes from other funding sources. And this can be donations, philanthropy, and so forth. So we're currently running these medical research institutes into the ground, and we're possibly looking at potential closures of some of the most renowned medical research institutes in Victoria in a few years. So it's funding, it's government funding, federal and state. The funding has been static over the last 10 years. We've got more and more researchers joining this space, this MND space, which I think is great. You need fresh blood, fresh talent, a new pair of eyes and lenses to look at an old problem, because you can look at it differently. But that needs to be sustained by the government at both levels. So you've got static funding, chronic underfunding, and you've probably got a risk-averse system that cares more about safety than benefit.
So, as I said to you, people with MND say to me the whole time, we want the right to try because we're dying anyway. So we don't really care about the side effects. Give us the right to try. And that's something that, to me looks a long way down the track.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, because of
Um,
legalities, because of, all of that stuff.
yeah, but look, there are pathways. So if you look at tofersen, which is the gene therapy for SOD1 MND, there was a compassionate access program. So if you didn't make it into the trial, you were able to access this drug. So there are ways to do it, but we don't do it enough in Australia. In the States, there's a huge movement for the Act for the right to try. I firmly believe, Jane, that should be the status quo here, because we know that clinical trials can be notoriously slow to set up. They can have very strict inclusion criteria, which means most patients that are more than 2 years from diagnosis are out. Most patients who are too progressed in terms of breathing are out. Most patients who are trying experimental drugs are out. It's too stringent.
It's way too stringent, and that's the feedback that I get from lived experience the whole time.
We
The
should
whole
never be
time.
turning volunteers. I mean, these people are volunteering.
Yeah. And
We should never turn them away from clinical trials. I wish we were more inclusive. There is a center in the States called Duke Uni, as you know, Rip Bedlack. He's great. He doesn't have any exclusion criteria in some of his trials. We
the,
should be much more accommodating.
the exclusion criteria set by the government or the drug companies.
It's set by the clinicians running the trial, and more so than the drug companies. So, as you know, Jane, clinicians, neurologists, they want patients who are relatively fit and who will last the study duration in the trial, whether it be 6 or 12 months. So they can get the numbers to get the power to do the statistics to see if there's a drug effect. That's the reality.
Okay, so it's not actually set in stone. Clinicians could change that.
Oh, we have. So, for instance, for our ambroxol trial, which we're running through the Florey, this is a phase 2 trial of a cough medicine called ambroxol. We had to relax the inclusion criteria at one site in order to reach the numbers and make it as flexible as possible for patients to volunteer. I can't impress something upon you enough, Jane, and that is what strikes me about people living with MND is their pure generosity and giving up. They can give up a blood sample for research. Some of them will donate their body to research, but they also give themselves up for drug trials. We wouldn't have clinical trials if it wasn't for this volunteerism of the MND community. And I've always been struck by this generosity from this community. I'm humbled by it.
And what's even more special, Brad, is that the generosity is not for themselves,
No,
for the next people and the next
the next generation. And they sign up, Jane, fully understanding that. And to me, it's heartbreaking that they're giving the gift of life for the next generation. And that's always struck me as well. The other thing that has struck me about the MND community, I'm going to talk about it, Jane, is the fundraising. I'm going to tell you right now that I firmly believe that MND patients and their families, they're not fundraisers. They're not designed just to fundraise to enable the research. That is not at all my attitude towards the MND community. They do it out of commitment and sharing that hope that one day there will be a cure. And it is incredible. You've got people in this community who are giving up their time day after day, fundraising, whether it be for Fight MND, MND Australia, the state associations, and so forth, as well as being research participants. It is just phenomenal. Again, I'm just always struck and humbled by these people, and it's the human in me, Jane. I want to give back in some way, and I give back by service as a researcher, and this commitment. And I give back in hope because most people diagnosed with MND have little hope or no hope at the time of diagnosis. And that's what medical research is about. It's about inspiring hope so these people can hang on day by day. But that's changing now. They're actually participating in the research through that co-design process. They're actually becoming part of the research team. They're not just donors for samples or participants in trials. They're part of the voice and the decision-making power of that research team. They are setting those expectations right from the outset, and they are driving the research and refining the research so that at the end of it, there'll be some research outcomes that are the most impactful for people living with MND day to day. So that's how I see it.
It's pretty special, isn't it? But then if stop and think about it, if everyone who volunteered for MND in any way, shape, or form just stopped tomorrow, the whole industry would shut down in Australia.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, my lab has only survived this drought of government research funding because of the MND community. And this is attributed to MND Australia and Fight MND and other foundations in this space. My lab would have crumbled without this support. And this is true of all of the labs across Australia. I think in some respects, Jane, MND is the envy of the neurodegenerative disease world. I have colleagues in Huntington's disease and Alzheimer's disease who actually remark about how well supported researchers are in the MND space, largely due to MND Australia and Fight MND. And I don't take that for granted. I think it is special, it's exceptional, and it really is sustaining our whole MND research workforce at the moment is being sustained by the MND community and its generosity and its hard work.
Let's show the other side of that, though. Tell me how much of your year is taken up not researching, but applying for grants.
So, Jane, I can tell you that I spend about 4 months of every year, that's 1/3 of my year, coming up with ideas for grants, writing those grants, applying for those grants, waiting 6 months for an outcome. I then have to give back. So I'm then asked to review other grants. This whole process takes about 4 months of the year. Now, you think about it, that is lost productivity. Those 4 months I could have dedicated to thinking more deeply about the MND problem, to being in the lab, motivating my staff and students, and actually writing manuscripts and publications. It is an absolute catastrophic loss of productivity. My best place, Jane, is on a whiteboard, sketching out ideas about how we're going to cure MND, or in the lab, talking to my lab colleagues and scientists about results, telling them where to go next, telling them how we can get this into people as quickly as possible. It's an absolute disaster, and I wish it was different.
How could it be different, Brad?
If the government stepped up
Yeah.
and increased, which is unlikely to happen, we've got a federal election, in 2 months. If the government stepped up and realised how critical and impactful and life-saving medical research is, and they certainly did during COVID. They gave a lot of priority to mRNA vaccines. I wish they could treat MND like COVID. MND to me is an epidemic. It's a scourge. It's a plague. It's been around for over 150 years. We still can't cure it. We still can't really effectively treat it. We can only manage the symptoms. That's largely palliative care, symptomatic care. If the government could just step up and say, hey, we'll fund the other 50 cents or whatever that the institutes need so they can actually do the work. And so the researchers can then get on and focus on doing their job. And their job is to cure disease. Their job is to not sit there and write these applications and take care of grant administration and grant reporting and all the human and animal ethics and everything else that comes with it. I wish I could give 100% of my time, Jane, to thinking deeply about MND, because I don't have time. The only chance I get is probably we had a roundtable session funded by Fight MND last year, which was great. They got 40 researchers world leading together. That was a great opportunity, but it was only 2 days. And we walked away from that back to the reality of our jobs. And our job is to write grants, earn the income to keep the labs afloat. I probably think about MND most after hours, probably in the evening, when I'm not attending to grant applications. And I tell my lab, feed me data, feed me results. That's my role. Show me your results. I'll tell you where you can go next with those results, and then how we can get it written up for publication so we can get it into the public domain. Because, Jane, it's about knowledge gain so others can act on our work. And ultimately, it's about getting drugs into bodies. I keep saying that. That is what we should be about, 100%.
So my question, which you've already answered, is how important is public and funding and public awareness?
It's everything. I entered this MND space back in 2001. So back then, all we had were we had the state association's MND Australia. We had Judith Durham, who was the patron at the time of MND Victoria, I believe. We had one MND gene. We had one animal model of MND. And I actually sat there throughout my career and I thought we need a Lou Gehrig in Australia. I know that sounds unfortunate, but I thought we need a national celebrity who's going to carry this disease and the MND clock urgency to Parliament. And that happened. Neil Danaher, 2013, 14, went public with his diagnosis. And he actually changed the MND landscape forever. He made MND a household name. He put MND on the lips of all our pollies and lobbyists and so forth. And he just got Australian of the Year. That is what I waited for all my career. It has been fantastic from the sense that, a fight have raised 115 mil. They've injected much needed money into this area. They've brought in clinical trials. Back in 2000s, we'd probably have one clinical trial every couple of years. Now we've got multiple clinical trials for MND every year. I think that's been one of the benefits. I think Fight MND and MND Australia have enabled us to increase our workforce, bringing fresh talent, fresh perspectives. Because, Jane, unfortunately, this is what happens after a couple of decades. The field becomes a bit stagnant. People have dogma. It becomes a bit dogmatic. And you get stuck into or entrained in a style of thinking. We need to smash that. We need to disrupt it. We have to constantly innovate. We can't get stuck in that mindset. And that's what I've loved about Fight MND and MND Australia is they've revitalized that research pipeline. But at the same time, Jane, there has to be a commitment from the researchers to keep it real. It's not just about discovery, it's about delivery into clinical trial. So you can be the smartest person in the room or in the institute, but unless you implement those findings for the MND community, the research is somewhat pointless. And this is something else about research is we all have our biases and prejudices about what we think the cause of MND is. And it can be quite niche. Jane, you'll know from talking from researchers, they get very tunnel vision and hyper focused on that little area inside the cell, inside the brain. I always tell my staff and students, always take a step back, look at the big picture, think about why you're here. And if this experiment isn't going to lead to a tangible benefit for the MND community, then don't do the experiment. Ask yourself that all the time. Yeah.
Something we were talking about the other day, and then I had to think. Every year there's a symposium held at Melbourne Uni, and it brings together Melbourne Uni, Peter Mac, and WeHi. And the heads of department or heads of different research all get up. It's a whole day symposium, and they talk about their research, their successes, and their failures. And it's similar to what you and I were talking about the other day, is to how about you lock all the smartest MND brains in the country in a room for a couple of days and throw out there the craziest thoughts that you can think of and actually have them acknowledged and something to be done about that.
Yeah.
Stop being so fecking safe the whole time.
Yes.
And this consortia I'm aware of closely because I know people who are involved in it. And it has just brought about some extraordinary change. And that is because there's a lack of fear, because they know they'll be supported. And that would be something that would be truly amazing in this country.
I would like to see more of that, Jane, for MND, but I'll tell you why. We're all constrained by the funding system. So you've got to write your grants, get them submitted. To some extent, the grant has to be feasible. The work has to be feasible because you've got to have outcomes at the end of it. And Fight MND gave this a good crack last year. We had the round table. We had a pre-survey in which we nominated some core research priorities for MND. Obviously it's all around cure. And then we got together and we thrashed out, we whiteboarded, we butcher papered some ideas and some priorities, and we came out with some objectives. And these were revisited at the Montreal International MND Symposium, and there may be a follow-up roundtable this year. I think we need more of this in the MND space. We need some outlandish, crazy ideas. It is not working. Think about it. The last 50 years, we've had 200 clinical trials in MND. They have all failed. The only signal we got was for riluzole or Rilotec, and even that is questionable and marginal.
You know,
Something is fundamentally wrong, I believe, about the way we are approaching this disease from a research perspective. We need to be bold. We need to be more daring for these patients, for the MND community. We owe it to them. We also owe it to them to listen to them.
yeah.
I've heard thousands of theories about what people think may have triggered their MND. We need to incorporate those ideas more into research because there will be common threads that you can pull out. And, research, it needs to be, I believe, my favorite type of research is high risk, maximum reward.
Oh, I
But the
like.
problem we've got is the government funding system doesn't cater towards that. They want safe projects with tangible outcomes that you can predict from the outset of the project. To
Well,
me, I'm sorry, that's not science.
that's not science, and that's not anything really. Um, that's just too safe. How can you, if you if you're going to research something new, you can't predict the outcome.
No,
So
I mean,
that's just putting massive limitations on what you're allowed to do.
exactly. And I think a lot of science, a lot of discoveries in science have been serendipitous. You probably know the story of penicillin, right? Accidental. The mold grew on the petri dish in the lab. Um, there are many examples of serendipity. I hope MND has its moment of serendipity, which can be life changing or game changing for people with MND. But that's what science thrives on. And I wish we could create a system, Jane, in which we had a significant investment in MND, and then what you do is you get together your leading thought leaders in MND, like the absolute brains trust, and you would nut out some crazy ideas and then turn them into tangible projects. We almost need, and I know that if you look at the UK, they've got a brains trust for experts ALS. So this is a, a scheme in which they've got the best of the best minds. And what they're doing is they're picking generic drugs, prescription medications, giving them to MND patients for 6 months, and then looking at a blood biomarker called NFL. And if there's a change in NFL at the end of the 6 months, then that drug will proceed to a clinical trial. But it's the brain's trust that pick those drugs. And we need something similar, I believe, in Australia.
Nice.
Happy to put my hand up.
Okay. All right. I wrote a note to myself after that last symposium. I think it was in January at Melbourne Uni, and I said to myself, get the heads of all research centres together via MNDA and put them in a room and work out how they can work collaboratively. I can't talk today.
Work together.
That one, thanks. And work outside of the box.
You know what? MND did this last year at the round table. They got in someone like Melanie Barlow from WeHi, who is a world famous trailblazing geneticist. They got her in. She works on epilepsy and Parkinson's. She came in with a different lens and she looked at our problem and she came up with some really insightful, impactful approaches. But I agree, we should do more of that. Let's get in the heads of these medical research institutes, these directors. As an example, Jane, another example is I spoke to the director of St. Vincent's Medical Research Institute. He works on diabetes, but I came at him from the MND angle and I picked his brains. And he has had some really insightful ideas about what we could apply from his space to MND. We need to be doing more of it. We, we think of ourselves as experts in MND, but I'm of the belief that the the game changer will probably come from outside of the MND space. And as an example of this, you know about this, we're doing precision medicine approach in MND, taking stem cells, making motor neurons in the petri dish. Where do you think that came from? Precision medicine came from Peter Mac. It came from oncology. So look at what we can learn and take up from outside disciplines and apply to neuroscience and neurology. It's just the beginning, Jane.
I heard I can't remember his name. I was at an Alzheimer's fundraiser on Friday night for Jackie Stewart, and the head of Alzheimer's at Heidelberg, Professor someone,
Chris Rowe or
older man, white hair. I'll find it for you.
yeah,
Speech that he gave blew my cotton picking little mind because he's looking outside the square.
yeah,
And I thought, oh my God, if only I can get him and our lot together.
yeah.
And that's just reinforcing what we've been saying.
Jane, there are pockets of this within the MND research workforce in Australia. I would like to put my hand up. I constantly think outside the square or outside the circle. I think my role as a scientist is to be disruptive, and I don't mean to interrupt. Well, I do kind of mean it's to challenge
Don't be
the last
polite.
50. Yeah, it's to challenge the last 50 years of science, and part of that means you go to conferences and you see the so-called experts get up and you should challenge them. Challenge their preconceptions because it's not working. We can't be doing this for the next 10 years with the same mindset. That's my fear after 24 years of doing this. But I can't do it alone. And there'll be others in the MND community that we can call upon, but we need to do more of this. Now, I understand it's a bit of hand waving saying do disruptive research. You've actually got to put that on paper and you've got to translate that into practice. It's one thing to wave your hand and say, think outside the square or think outside the motor neuron and view this disease as a body-wide systemic problem or a multi-system problem, which we've known for decades. But one of my bugbears, Jane, in this field is that we talk about this all the time about the need for multiple drugs, right? We've known this for 20 years. It's a no-brainer to me that if you have a single drug, you do a clinical trial, the clinical trial fails in MND. It's a no-brainer. I don't know. I think funding bodies need to be a bit more stringent around this and perhaps only consider trials where you've got multiple drugs or multiple agents. This disease is complex, it's tricky, it's challenging. You need a multi-angle, multi-prong approach. I kind of get sick of hearing people say it. We've known for 20 years. So let's start doing clinical trials differently.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got lots of frustrations in this field, Jane. I sometimes I feel like an old man. I, I,
Mate,
I
you're
and,
fine.
and
You're not
I'm always ranting to my lab about this is probably how it should be done, but it's not being done because of the safe funding model, because of the safe clinical trial design. I think look, one person who's been a real pioneer at this, I would say, is Professor Dominic Rowe
fine.
from Macquarie.
Yeah.
Dom's great. He's disruptive. He challenges the medical establishment, the status quo. If he can't get a clinical trial funded through normal funding bodies, he'll go out and fundraise for it. And he's got the Floreys working for him. Dom is a real trailblazer, and I appreciate his approach to this. We need more of it.
Well, Dom regularly says that this disease is not incurable, it's underfunded.
I share that view. I think any disease can be conquered ultimately, and it needs two things. It needs sustained, targeted funding, and it needs the right minds. It needs people that care and give back to the MND community. It's one thing to take a grant that's being funded by the community, but the onus is on you to give back. You need to care about where that money came from, care about what these people and families are going through, the absolute nightmare and horror of this disease. So it works two ways, Jane. You can't just be at the receiving end as a researcher. You you have to care about that patient population that you are in service to. I really believe that, and I drum that into my staff and students.
So it,
You
yeah, it goes. So Peter Rosso, I don't know if you know Peter Rosso, he has MND, he's in, Pete. So Pete and I are both MND Australia ambassadors this year. One of the first things that we are going to be doing is going to as many research labs as we can, because there are so many researchers out there who've never met anybody with lived experience.
Isn't that astounding?
Astounding.
Oh, I just find that astounding. I think that should be part of PhD students at training.
One, go and meet someone with MND.
Yeah. I mean, community engagement is one thing, right? You might turn up at a fundraiser, but what you're talking about is deep at a deeper level. It's interactive. And well, look, one thing, Jane, I will pick up on is I notice sometimes students and maybe postdocs and people can be a bit uncomfortable around the wheelchairs and the walking aids.
Yeah.
And I get this sense sometimes that these patients they're a bit ostracized, they're a bit isolated. They should be embedded and integrated in the
Not a
audience.
bit, not a bit, Brad. A lot
I
ostracized.
don't,
My
I
kids,
don't understand that. I'm going to tell you right now. If I go to a conference and I see someone like Phil Camden or Leanne Slackovitis, or I go up to them first. I'm sorry, never mind about the researchers and the profs in the room, because it is absolute quality time spent with the people that matter the most to my motivations as a medical researcher. And I think we should fully integrate and embrace them. They should be given front row, center stage. I absolutely agree with that.
look, you're not going to get an argument from me because I spend a lot of time advocating that they do that. There's also a slight issue with the other people that you were talking about of ego. Not the
I don't
people.
understand the ego because no one on this planet
One's cracked this nut yet, mate. So
has
why
cured
have
this
they got
disease.
such a big
So
fucking
I don't
ego?
understand why you would operate in that way. If anything, I'm ashamed as a medical researcher, been doing this for 24 years. I'm ashamed at how slow the pace is. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated at many levels, Jane. I'm frustrated at the funding system. You know, I'm frustrated at the pace at which some institutions operate and they don't respect or care about the MND clock, which is constantly counting down. You try and get an agreement through, and it's taking months and years. Um, if anything, I'm let down. I'm
Yeah,
let down by the whole system. It has not delivered. I told you, Jane, that I attended a funeral for a young man who passed away from MND tragically at 26 a few weeks ago. I walked away from that. Obviously, I was devastated for the family who's left behind. I was devastated for this young man who went through the absolute horror and indignity of MND. But I was also devastated that the medical research fraternity had let down this family and others.
I know
It's
you're.
just not fit for purpose.
I agree. Well, I know I'm a disruptor. I know that Dom's a disruptor. I know that you're a disruptor. So we might just have to disrupt together.
Let's keep disrupting, Jane, because I met you 2 years ago. Do you remember at the we had the MND summit at Calvary, and I was drawn to you straight away because I was drawn to your lack of fear during question time. You were outspoken. But you know what? That's exactly what this field needs. It needs outspoken advocates, survivors like you. It needs outspoken researchers. It needs outspoken neurologists, outspoken funding bodies, agencies, the whole patients especially. But you know, poor patients, right? They're the horror of what they're going through. We should be their spokespersons, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And we'll
Yeah.
just
So
we'll just do a better job of it.
yeah.
I
Look,
meant
I want to do.
that day too, though, Phil. I mean, Brad.
You know what was good about that day too? So they paired us up with an MND buddy. So I got paired up with a an MND survivor. Her husband had died from MND, just like yours, and we had quality time during the coffee break. I think it was gold to walk away with that, and I cannot underestimate how important that bi-directional communication and relationship is with the MND community as a researcher. We do not sit, well, I certainly don't, we do not sit in our ivory towers working on petri dish and animal models and worm models and so forth. We, I care. I care deeply, and I, but I wish I could work faster, smarter, and more efficiently if the system could enable it.
So the other thing about this, the Jackie Stewart thing I went to on the weekend, Jackie Stewart's wife has dementia, and he started a global charity called Race for Dementia.
Mhm,
What he's done is he has taken the researchers and the F1 team leaders,
mhm.
and he said to the F1 team leaders, teach these people about how to do business, teach these people about how to do life better, teach these people how to, and the remarkable change in a matter of a couple of years has been phenomenal because they're looking at it, the researchers are looking at it from a totally different perspective.
Yeah, we need more of that in MND. We need to look at it through, I don't know, the corporate lens. Um, I think one of the challenges with research, Jane, is you're kind of expected to do everything yourself, and you don't need to. So when it comes to media, communications, legal, you actually you work with the experts, and I think that's great. What you're saying, bringing the corporate geniuses, the F1, bringing that lens,
Even the
yeah, to
coaches, we can,
yeah, exactly. We need to run this fight for a cure like an F1.
and that's what they're doing with Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Well, MND is more urgent.
yeah, I know.
Like, this is what puzzles me about the government's, attitude to this. I think MND should be a national priority. Alzheimer's, sure, it's got the numbers. It's equally devastating, but it also goes on for a longer period,
I don't have,
years, if not decades. MND, people with MND do not have time. They don't have time for bureaucracy, paperwork, approvals. I think of all the roadblocks in medical research. Um, if we had a government that could listen to this and respond accordingly, they gave 50 million pounds for United to end MND in the UK. They gave 500 million US for the act to defeat ALS in the States, although we'll see what Trump does with that. That's
that
the
might
type of,
be, yeah.
yeah, that's the type of action we need from the Australian government.
And at the end of the day, it would be a cost, and I say this over and over and over and over again. If they do a cost benefit analysis and what they're currently spending, that they have no idea where the money's going to where it
Yeah,
was actually targeted, there would be a saving.
that's exactly how these people think. So it's all about cost benefit ratio. What is the cost benefit to the
Well,
community?
let them know. Now, I
Yeah.
want to go off one last question because you
Mm,
can. But the other day when we had a long talk, I just loved what you said, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. That you said that you believe that people have a belief in a power greater than themselves. If it's faith, God, Buddha, whatever. but a power greater than themselves, when they have this illness, you see them anecdotally doing better.
Yes.
Go.
That, so I mentioned before that I went to a Healing ALS conference back in 2019, and all of the keynote speakers were MND survivors. Some of them were self-professed reversals, but they all had managed to halt their disease. They're all plateaued. And the thing that struck me about these 8 MND sufferers and somewhat survivors is they all had 2 things in common. So the first is they all had faith. So they believed in a higher power, and they had turned to their faith to help get them through this journey. And the second thing is they all had positive mental attitude. So these people were very upbeat despite the crushing odds. I can't imagine, it's inconceivable to me being dealt this diagnosis, yet still remaining positive and upbeat. People like Leanne, people like Emma Vullen, if I can mention names in this podcast. And I think that resounded with me because I thought I could think of examples, and I just gave a couple. Phil Camden is another example, someone who is strongly into his faith, but also has a very positive mindset and positive mental attitude about he's going to take control. He's going to control this disease to the best of his ability through exercise regimes, similar to Leanne. So that these people, right from the outset, they somewhat accept the bad cards they've been dealt, and they also know it's somewhat beyond their control with the neurology and the treatments and so forth. So they'll say, okay, well, these are the aspects of the disease I can control. And that's probably their approach to this disease. So anecdotally, I think there could be something there. I can't put it into scientific terms what it is, whether it could be a placebo effect or a sense of well-being. But I said to you the other week, I wish we could bottle it up and work out where in the brain this effect is coming from and how we could make it druggable and target this. So that may be surprising coming from a hardcore scientist like me, but I am open. I am open to this because it was a common thread with these 8 ALS reversals.
Was that
This
a
is
Rick Bedlack thing?
sorry.
Was that a Rick Bedlack
Yeah,
conference?
these are all. Rick Bedlack is their neurologist, so they're all through his clinic. I mean, he's now diagnosed, I think, 50 ALS reversals, which is astounding. And you know what, Rick Bedlack, he's an exemplar for me as well because he's now doing the science on these reversals.
Yeah,
It's one thing to claim you've got 50 reversals, but now he's looking into the genes, the gut microbiome. He's doing questionnaires about their occupation, geography, environment. At least someone in the world is looking at that.
he came on the podcast last,
Yeah, I saw.
told us all about that. But
Yeah.
the thing that I actually, after you and I had that conversation, I was in touch with Phil Bedlack, Phil Camden, and said,
Mm.
believe what Brad's just said. And Phil said, but I know because it works for me. And the fact that you are such a hardcore scientist and your mind is open to believe that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm not saying, yeah, I'm not claiming that you can wish MND away
I know you're not.
by any stretch of the imagination. But what I'm saying is
And so we'll see a
if
difference.
you can control aspects of the disease, and this comes back to exercise regimens, diet, supplements, I'm open to anything. If that gives you a sense of control over the course of your disease, then I think that could positively impact your approach to day-to-day life. So I understand that's very easy to hear from me. I know.
To work Neil Danaher in that batch too.
Yes, look at Neil. Remarkable. 12 years. 12 years living with this disease. You know, he'll get up there again for Big Freeze 11.
Yeah,
It's just astonishing. But look at his mindset.
yeah,
He's a larrikin.
yeah.
He's he's such a wonderful person, and I think that can have an impact on the course of the disease. So what I want to impress to your viewers here is that I think there are aspects of the disease which you can control, and it can be positively steer this disease course. So, look, I'm going to put it out there. I used to watch the X Files. I'm a huge X Files fan, and I kind of see
Third, mate.
Yeah, Rick Bedlack is kind of like the Fox Mulder, right, of ALS. And I think nobody on this planet has the answer right now to cure this disease. So let's be agnostic. Let's be open
Yep.
to every possibility, but realistic at the time.
Yep.
Realistic.
Brad, you have been amazing. Took me a couple of years to tie you down to do this, but now you've done it. You're happy.
I was a bit scared.
I know you were
I
scared. Were you scared of
Because
me?
you're so fearsome.
Yeah, I'm terrifying, Brad.
But you know what? I realize we're both fearsome. And I love how you opened by saying Brad's got a good brain and a good heart. You need both. You
Yeah.
need both if you are working in this space real to conquer this disease. You do.
You
It's
have.
all it's all heart.
It is.
That's what drives me and drives my group.
Well, can you walk outside and thank them all for me? And
I'm going to do that.
I love doing a little tour of the Florey, so I'm going to come in and do another one because it just blows my mind every time I'm in there.
Please do. You're
And
going to hear some nerds speak, but
oh,
ultimately, we are nerds at heart,
well,
but we're nerds with heart. And I think that is the best combination to conquer this disease.
you
I
should
think.
get a tattoo that says "Nerds with Heart" inside a heart on your arm.
I don't know about a tap, but maybe a coffee mug, and I'll walk around with it, and um, yeah. All
You're the best. Thank you so
right.
much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to keep engaging with you and picking your brain as well.
We'll be spending more time together.
Yeah. Good on you, Jane. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.